and I'm really excited to be here, really honored that we have so many audience members, and really big thanks to the entire TEDx team for to give us this chance to share ideas. And when we were running Salon, this is one of the best things that we sort of found, which is just being able to bring together so many different disciplines and so many different people. So just watching Kay's presentations about all the different things you can do with food, which is really eye-opening. So in my presentation, I want to share with you a few stories from my life, particularly around the theme of how do you do really hard things. And here I want to say hard is things that are either things you're not supposed to do at a particular age, or things that seem really difficult for you to be a part of, or just industries or jobs or schools that seem really hard to get into. I'm going to start my talk with this quote. And this quote has a really big, profound impact on me, and hopefully by the end of the talk, this is something that you guys will remember as well. And it's very simple. It says, "Doubt has killed more dreams than failure ever will." And I think of this quote every time I want to do something, and then I hear a little voice in my head say, "Oh no, that's impossible." Right? "Oh no, I can't open restaurants because who does that at age 19?" And when you say that and you allow that little voice to talk to yourself, you've already killed the dream, right? The dream is dead. You're not going to do it. And instead, what I tried to do in many parts of my life is actually to let failure kill my dreams. And I was pleasantly surprised that many times they didn't die. So let's talk about this really scary thing called failure. Right, failure is something that we've all lived with. It's something that we are all motivated by. We want to not fail. We want to do things that are successful, that are glamorous, that are prestigious. We want to stay far away from failure. But I really think that that's actually the wrong attitude. I actually think that failure could be our friend. I actually think that failure could be the most powerful ally we have in deciding how we can grow as a person. And I'll start with a story of a time that I really failed. So some of you guys might recognize this in Beijing as a school. This is a school called Renda Fuzhong, the high school affiliated to the People's University of China. And has a reputation, along with a few other schools in Beijing, to be really difficult, both to get into, but also to survive, right? And I didn't really appreciate this until I came to China. So my brief life story is I was born in the United States, raised in China for a little bit, went back to the United States for first grade through ninth grade. 9 years continuous in the United States, didn't come back to China, forgot all of my Chinese. My parents were really upset with me. And so every weekend, they would send me to Chinese school. They would teach me how to learn Chinese. But unfortunately, to their disappointment, I got really good at Pokemon. And I didn't learn much Chinese. And so eventually, they got so fed up, they said, "Okay, Max, we're taking hard measures. We're sending you back to China, and you have to survive in this school." So I come back. And I'm a pretty good student in Chicago. You know, like at my elementary school, there's a little trophy award thing with like different prizes, and like my name is like on several of those prizes. And so I thought I was really good stuff. You know, I was a good student. I was really motivated to study. I come here and I take a test in Renda Fuzhong, and I get 20 points out of 140 points. And my teacher, in handing the test back to me, said, "Max, if you just randomly guessed on this test, you would have got better points." And that was really hard. You know, like we talk about this now, we laugh about it, but in the time, it was just really hard for me because a lot of my identity, the people who I thought, a person I thought I was, right, was this person who was a really good student. And here, every single day at Renda Fuzhong was reality breaking my sense of self. And so I felt like this. I felt like the one small, insignificant part of this very large academic institution. But I also learned something there, because in those 3 months at Renda Fuzhong, right, I learned more Chinese than 9 years of Chinese school. And I didn't even play any Pokemon. And it was one of the most educational experiences of my life. And I said to myself, I've actually been so afraid of being a bad student that I never did many of the things you want to do, right, which is to study things you care about, right, which is ask questions about things you don't understand, right, which is ask other people for help, right? Because I was so concerned about being a good student, I never did that because it would make me look weak, make me look less smart. Here, I had no problems being the stupidest person. And so I want to actually say that when we think of F's, right, for failure, we should also think of them F for freedom. Because failing gives you the freedom to really have, freedom to really enjoy the things that you don't think you can do. And liberated by this sense of freedom, I went on to do a few other things that I didn't think were possible. Okay, So the next one is, all right, let me briefly describe this mental model, right? What does it mean to learn things really fast? It means you have to be in an environment where you are the least intelligent and least capable person, right? Because then every single person around you, every single student, teacher, right, can be your teacher. So in mathematics, there's a really beautiful idea called the DEL. And the DEL is a symbol that allows you to take a survey of three-dimensional land. What does it look like? If you go to a mountaintop, right, if you put the DEL on like a mountain, you would get a direction to the highest point, to the direction that allows you to go the fastest, right? And so in some sense, abstractly, the DEL is this idea that you can say, what is the hardest thing I could be doing right now, right? And then that DEL gives you the direction. So throughout parts of my life, after high school, I asked myself, what is the hardest thing I could be doing? And instead of trying to avoid it and trying to saying that would lead me to failure, I went on and tried to do that one directly. So several things I thought were really hard. One of them is this is school. It's called Singularity University, right? And for those of you guys who've never heard of it, in Chinese it's called 起点大学. It's also very mysterious sounding. But Larry Page, who's the co-founder of Google, has repeatedly said that this is where he wants to go to school. And it's a concentration of very diverse different disciplines in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, renewable energies, robotics, right? And it sort of flies people from around the world to one location, and for 10 weeks, you get the chance to learn from these masters of their field what the future looks like. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of money. It costs $26,000 to be exact. And in order to get into it, you need to win the local competition of your country. Right? So maybe Mexico hosts a competition, right? And then the winner of the Mexico competition gets to apply for a slot at Singularity. And so you might imagine it was really, really difficult. But when I was a sophomore in college, I was 20 years old, I said, I want to go there, right? But I need to find a way in that was obviously not going to be either paying the $26,000, because I didn't have any money, or winning the local competition. And so instead what I found was another way. And I found people who would give you a chance to do something that you shouldn't be qualified to do, right? And I was prepared to do anything. Coming back from Renafudong, I was prepared to like work and move boxes if I get to be a part of the school. And so the guy on the right here, this guy in a really nice suit, is this guy called Raymond, right? And Raymond is kind of like a very big turning point in my life because Raymond looked at me as a 20-year-old and said, you know what? I think you have what it takes to help me in Singularity. And he was the head of the biotechnology track, right? He was the guy who was organizing the entire section for all of the different classes on engineering our genomes. And he said, you're 20 years old, but I still believe in you. So he invited me to come be his teaching fellow. And my job, instead of attending the university, was actually creating the classes for biotechnology. Right? So I led a workshop in genetic engineering. I flew in speakers from Israel and from Harvard and from other places who can talk about what the future of bioengineering looked like. And I also led the other students who were 10 years older than me, right, on these classes. And every night when I went to bed at Singularity University, I felt like an imposter. I felt like tomorrow morning someone's gonna wake up and say, Max, what are you doing here? Right? Like you don't belong. And that was really challenging. But after about 6-7 weeks of doing that, I started realizing that I can actually help these other people too. And that was an experience, I think, of what our approach to doing hard things look like. Right? Whenever we want something, usually in life, we try to do this method. This is called the resume make it rain method. Right? You print out a lot of resumes about yourself, and then you try to send them out to many people as possible, and you hope that someone somewhere will pick you up out of the crowd, right, and choose you and give you opportunities. But in reality, that doesn't happen. In reality, there's too many applications and there's too few slots. So instead, I wanted to share with you a different method. A different method is called the sharpshooter method. And in this method, the goal is to say, what do you really want, right? Instead of sort of having many different diffuse opportunities, choose one thing you want, and then you go all in on it. And you say, I'm choosing this no matter what, and I'm going to wait until someone gives me this job. And usually it doesn't work. Usually you get rejected. But if you're comfortable with failure, you're comfortable with being rejected, right, you can actually push through people's rejections. So let me give you a very concrete story. There was a fellowship in the United States. It's called the Teal Fellowship, and it was started by the guy who was one of the people behind PayPal. Right, so this guy, started the PayPal company, sold it to eBay, made a lot of money, and he has a very unconventional view on education. So he wants to give high school and college students a chance to explore their dreams. And you get a scholarship for $100,000, right, if you're under the age of 20. And I was super excited. I applied for the fellowship, and I was told that unfortunately I just turned 20.5. Whoops. This doesn't, oh, it doesn't sync. I'll just look here. I was too old, right? I was rejected outright, and they said, you can't have a chance to have this adventure because you don't belong in this particular crew. And I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then I want to go create my own version of this, right? So I talked to my parents. I said, Mom and Dad, I'm leaving university. I'm dropping out of school. I'm going to take a one-way plane ticket to California, and I'm going to spend 2 years there trying to get someone to give me $100,000. And my parents are Chinese. My parents like, are you crazy? So my grandparents called me, my parents called me, and they tried a lot of pressures to make sure that I didn't do this thing. But eventually, I overcame all of that, and I still did it. And I went there in pursuit of a dream. And the dream, right, so going back to Sharpshooter, was this company. This company was a data science company, and it was started by the head of the Stanford math department, was funded by sort of DARPA, and was really successful as data science. The only problem was that professors, assistant professors at universities were asking to be interns at this company. And here I was, 22 years old, right, with no college degree, and I wanted to apply. But I had I have two advantages. The first advantage was I had my mentor from Singularity, right, and sort of having seen me work with him so closely for 3 months, he was willing to say, I recommend Max. And I think this is a key lesson in many chances for us as we want to do things. We have to find people who believe in us, right? And then we have to ask them to take bets on us again and again. So he raised his reputation. He said, I believe in Max. I saw him work with me once. He should do it. And the second one was I was really persistent. So after the first time they told me I was too young, I went back a second time. And they were like, you're still too young. It's only been like a month. And I went back a third time, and eventually I went back so many times to interview that they said, you know what, stop bothering us. We'll give you an actual technical interview, and you'll see that you can't perform your job, and then you're going to go home. But I managed to do decently well on this technical interview. And they invited me back for a third time, for a fourth time, and after a bunch of interviewing, 2 months after I said I want to work at this company, they accepted me. And when I tell this story to people, I think it changes how I thought about jobs, because I thought previously that you had to just one chance for someone to take a risk on you. But if you really want something, you have to be willing to get rejected a bunch of times, right? But it worked out. And eventually, I ended up working with them for about 1.5 years and worked on actually the biggest company deal that Ayasti had. It was a $1 million deal, right? And there was only 3 people from the company sent on this project. Me, another guy who did programming, and the third guy who did business. This is Mr. Woods on the stage here. After about 2 weeks, the other person on the team who did programming, which is the real work of all those things, I think, left the team. And so it went from a 3-person team to a 2-person team. And then the client, the customer that we had, called us and said, actually, this job we want done in 3 months, we need to done in a month and a half. And so over the course of like a week, the amount of work I had to do quadrupled, right, times 4. And basically I lived in New York for 7 days a week, about 12, 13 hours a day with no weekends, right, for an entire month and a half. I just worked on this project. And it actually completed, finished well, the customer was happy, the company was really surprised, and everything sort of worked out. And the results of it made it on Bloomberg, because we were actually helping one of the large banks in the United States overcome one of their federal regulations. And in the course of this, I learned a lot of lessons about what it meant to be a data scientist, because this data science field that I was trying to get a job in was very, very new, right? That it was first created somewhere in like 2011, and no one really knew how to get a job, right? Let alone how to get a job as a young person, right? Most people applying to data science were coming from a PhD, people who were like 30-something years old. And so in collecting all experiences I had and looking at all my friends and asking them for advice, we together decided to write a book, right? It's called the Data Science Handbook. And it's a story of 25 data scientists who started, from their different PhD programs and all the way up until they became the guy who ran Uber's data science team, Airbnb's data science team, Facebook's data science team, right? And even the chief data scientist of the White House for the entire US government. And in collecting this, I found that every one of those people, right, in trying to break into this industry had to go through the same things. And in particular, I think the most memorable moment was reading about how other people got rejected as well. So that's a lot of information, but I want to sort of summarize all of these things into a few take-home messages for you, right? And the first one is that I think you should always find chances to take gaps in life, right? In school, that means a gap year. It means when you're no longer a student and instead you get to go and either try to work, try to travel, try to do things that you're not supposed to do as a student. In working times, it means taking a gap and either switching your career or choosing not to work. I personally think that employment is overrated. And for the people in here looking for jobs or parents or people already working, you might think I'm crazy, but I think that too many times we are forcing ourselves to get a job before we know what we really want, right? And I think that's the big difference. The second one is that when you decide what you want to do, when you choose your job, you choose your school, or choose your life project, right? You should always ask yourself, what do you really want? And then you should ask, how do I get there? And I think that's a big difference between usually how we think about this, which is you ask, what resources do I have, right? What things do I have right here? And then how do I use these things most productively? Because when you say you want to do something crazy, for example, you want to start a restaurant, or later on you're going to hear someone starting a school, right? You start with very little of the overall piece. You only have an idea and your courage. But if you're committed to the course, then magically things will come out of the world and just glue to your project, right? Until it becomes real. So I think that's really interesting as well. The third one, I think really the key for my own personal journey, and hopefully for many of your journeys, is you need to find people who believe in you, right? Believe in you beyond your status, beyond your pedigree, beyond your background, and say, I really see that in you can be a really amazing person. And then when they take a chance on you, you have to work your butt off and prove to them that they're right? And I did this through Singularity. I did this when the company hired me. I repeatedly said, please take a chance on me. And they know that they're taking a chance on you. But afterwards, you show them that they're successful. Finally, I think that you should always ask yourself, what is the hardest thing I could be doing? And you ask yourself that every single year, every single 2 years, so that you never get stuck in a particular part of life. If you feel like your life's too easy, that means you're not doing things hard enough. And I challenge each one of you guys to always ask yourself, what is the hardest thing I could be doing? So to end with a quote, I think one that hopefully now you have more feeling for, I think doubt has killed more dreams than failure ever will. And I hope that you guys will not let doubt kill your dreams, will take the courage to let failure kill your dreams, and have the surprise, as I did, to find out that failure doesn't actually kill your dreams. Thank you.